Hi everybody and welcome back to the Cupcake Jemma channel with me, Sally, and to the Crumbs and Doilies shop here in Soho, which for obvious reasons is not actually a shop right now. We are of course closed, but we'll be updating you guys as soon as we can open. We will be here, so make sure you follow us over on Instagram. That's at Crumbs and Doilies as well as at Cupcake Jemma, so you can see all the updates as well as all the awesome stuff that you can get over on CupcakeJemma.com and the freshly baked cookies on crumbsanddoilies.com. We've got all the bake at home kits, everything to keep you occupied during this lockdown. Anyway, today's recipe is going to be for a Cherry Bakewell Tart, which is pretty much the same as a Bakewell Tart, but with the addition of icing and a cherry. So for me, it is the obvious choice because icing and cherries make everything better. And also you'll notice that I'm going to be making 6 really cute little tarts because I have these really cute little tins. But this recipe also makes enough for an 8 to 9 inch kind of regular tart tin. So we're going to start by making the shortcrust pastry, and we're going to do it in the food processor. You can do this by hand, but it's a lot easier if you do have one of these. So we're going to start with 200 grams of plain or all-purpose flour and 30 grams of icing sugar, just to sweeten this a little bit because this is a sweet tart. And then we've got butter, so I've got 100 grams of unsalted butter, which I've chopped into little cubes, and I've had it in the fridge up until now, so it's really firm. So that is going in too, and we're going to start by whizzing this up for a few seconds at a time. Basically, we want to get it to a dry breadcrumb consistency. And now it is time to bring all of this together. So we need to add a little bit of moisture. We're going to start with 1 egg yolk. A lot of recipes for shortcrust don't have egg in them, but I love it because I think it adds an extra richness to it. So we're going to go in with 1 whole egg yolk, as well as 1 teaspoon of cider vinegar. You don't have to use this. Basically, this just kind of helps the gluten from not forming, so I like to use it. So 1 teaspoon going in, and then we need some cold water. Make sure it is cold, and I'm going to start with 2 teaspoons. We're going to pulse this and see if it's kind of wet enough to bring together. So if we look inside and you squeeze a clump of it together, you can see it is kind of forming a bit of a ball, but it's a little bit too dry still. So I am going to add another teaspoon, maybe an extra half of some water. We'll pulse it together and then we should be there. There, that looks much better. So now we can tip this out onto the surface, and we're just going to knead it very gently for a few seconds just to bring it into one smooth dough. So just squeezing it with your hands, pushing it down, and it will get a lot smoother. And now it is time to chill this pastry down for about an hour or so because we've been working with it for a little while now. The butter started to heat up. We do not want the butter to melt. So if you are making 1 large tart, you just want to form this pastry into a disc like this, wrap it up in cling film and chuck it in the fridge. But of course, I am making 6, so I'm actually going to divide my pastry now before it goes into the fridge, and it's going to be 60 grams each. And now these are ready to go in the fridge, so minimum of 1 hour, but if you're kind of getting ahead of the game, you can do this the day before, just kind of wrap them in cling film, put them in the fridge. But luckily, I made some yesterday and I got them out of the fridge already because they've been in overnight. They do get really hard and it'll be impossible for us to roll them out. So if you feel like yours has gone a bit too far, just take them out until you can kind of squish it so that you don't break your back trying to roll it out. So now it is time to roll out. So I've got some flour here, so we're just going to dust the surface lightly with flour. And also a little bit of flour on your rolling pin. I've got this nice handy little one here. And then we're going to take our first disc, and we just want to kind of keep this as circular as we can. So my top tip for rolling out pastry is to go forwards and back once, turn it 90 degrees, forwards and back again. And I know it might feel like it's going to take forever, but this is the way you get a nice circle of pastry, so have patience. We're rolling these pretty thin, so about 2 to 3 millimeters. And then before we put them into the tins, we just want to get rid of some of these raggedy edges and make sure that they're as kind of round as possible, which, ta-da! I've got this really nice big cookie cutter here, which I'm gonna chomp them out with. And if you don't have one of these, you can just use a knife. But if you don't have one of these and you want one of these, we've actually got this fab set over on CupcakeJemma.com. You get 19 cutters here. So everything from like, I mean, I don't really know what you'd use the tiny one for. Tiny cookies. That's what you'd use it for, all the way up to 7 inches, so you can use these to trim off the edges of your cakes as well. So I'll pop a link to that in the description box below. But anyway, back with our pastry, we've got our nice round here and we need to get it into this little tin. So be careful because this is very delicate. If you've got long nails, be uber delicate because you don't want to pierce it with your nails. We're gonna gently pop it on top of the tin and I'm gonna ever so slowly and ever so gently edge it into the bottom. And we want to make sure that the pastry gets right into the corner of these tins. So just use your fingertip to kind of push in there. But if you do have long nails or you feel like you're just kind of stabbing at the pastry, a little top tip here is to use some of your off-cut pastry, make a little kind of blob of it and use that to push into the corner of your pastry case. And once you're happy that it's in the corners, we then just want to run our fingers around the edge of the dish, just applying a little bit of pressure just to make sure it gets into all of those grooves. And if you have a little tear, do not worry guys, just grab a bit of your offcut and push it in to cover it up. This is very forgiving pastry. So we're nearly there. We're just going to stab some holes in the bottom of our pastry case because we're going to blind bake these. So we're going to put them in the oven without anything in them first, and we don't want them to puff up. Now you might have noticed that I've left the kind of excess pastry sticking up around the tin, and that is for a reason, because this pastry has a tendency to shrink and I don't want these to like end up really small. So I'm actually going to bake them like this and then we're going to trim off this excess a little bit later. So one more thing that will help it from shrinking is to put it back into the fridge and get them really cold again. So I'm going to do the same for all 6 of my tins and then we're going to put them in the fridge for 1 hour. So these are firmed up nicely, they're not kind of squishy anymore. So the last thing we do before we put them into the oven is we're going to fill them with some rice or some baking beans just to weigh them down, because like I said, we're going to blind bake these. We're not putting any filling in them just yet. So the first thing we need to do is put a little bit of greaseproof inside. So I've got a circle here about the same size as the pastry that we cut out. And the easiest way to do a circle with greaseproof is to grab a square, fold it into quarters, and then grab yourself some scissors and we're just going to cut a kind of curve from corner to corner. We open it up and we've got a circle here. Now I like to scrunch these up like this. This just means that the rice can get into kind of the very corners of your tart tin. So unravel it, pop it into your dish, and then we're going to fill it up with rice. So I have rice here that is my kind of baking rice. So I've used this so many times, it's not kind of getting wasted or anything. And I prefer it to baking beans because again, with these really little ones, it gets into all the corners. So fill it up, give it a little press, and it is ready to go in the oven. And the oven is preheated to 180 degrees C, which is fan assisted. And we're going to start by putting the little cases in for 11 minutes and then we'll give them an egg wash. Okay, these are looking pretty good so far, but now, like I said, we're going to give them an egg wash. So we need to remove this baking rice. So you need to do this really, really carefully because, and I mean, they're really hot more than anything, be careful of that, but also the dishes are really delicate. So what we want to do is lift this out. So gather up the sides of the baking paper and just very, very gently lift them out of the dish. So for my egg wash, I am using a mixture of an egg, obviously, but with a little splash of milk in there as well. And then just use a pastry brush to lightly spread the egg on the bottom and the sides of your pastry dishes. And now they're going to go back into the oven for another 5 to 6 minutes until they're lovely and golden, and then we'll take them out, and whilst they're cooling we can make our Frangipan filling. So our little tart cases are cooling down, and I know you're probably thinking they look a little bit raggedy and not so neat, but trust me, we've got lots to do to these guys and they're gonna look so good when we finish. But we're actually gonna start making our Frangipan filling, which is really, really simple to make. And we're gonna start like a normal cake batter by creaming together 100 grams of both really lovely soft unsalted butter and 100 grams of caster sugar. Once they've had a couple of minutes kind of beating together, they're lovely and creamy and a little bit fluffy, we're going to start adding some eggs. So I've got 2 eggs here, which I'm also going to add a little bit of almond extract to, which is quite important in the Frangipan kind of recipe, but I understand that a lot of people don't really like this. It's very strong in flavour, so if you really don't like it, leave it out because you've got to make these tarts, okay? So I'm just going to add about a 1/4 teaspoon into my eggs, and we'll whisk these together and then we'll add them into our mixer a little bit at a time. And once you've added all of the egg, it might look a little bit like it's split, but don't worry. Once we add our dry ingredients, it's going to bring it all back together. And that is 85 grams of ground almonds. So that's going to go in along with 50 grams of plain or all-purpose flour. And then we're just going to put this on a low speed just to combine it all. Done, Frangipan done. Super, super quick and easy. We're just gonna leave that in the mixer for a little while whilst we tidy up our pastry cases. So we're gonna trim off this excess, and I'm gonna do it with this tiny little serrated knife that I've got. I'm just gonna do this very slowly, and we're gonna go in here and just backwards, forwards along the top of the tin. I'm just tipping out the excess. Just make sure you hold the case inside the tin. The first time I did this, I turned it upside down and obviously the whole thing fell out. So don't do that. But as you can see, they look nice and level now, and they look really, really neat. So they are ready to be filled. So let me just trim down the rest of these and I'll show you how we're gonna layer it all up inside. So before we put our Frangipan filling in, we're actually going to put a layer of jam, because that is what is in a Bakewell tart. So you can use whatever jam you want to here. I'm going to use raspberry. That is the traditional one, I believe. So I'm going to go in with about a teaspoon in the bottom of each tart, and I'm going to spread it around so it covers the whole base. And once that's done, we can put our Frangipan on top. But as you can see, or you'll see in a little while, this is very thick. So trying to spread it on top of the jam without the jam smushing into it can be quite tricky. So we're actually going to put it into a piping bag and pipe it on top. And I fitted my piping bag with a small round nozzle here, but if you've got disposable ones, just cut about 1 centimetre or so off the end, and then we're going to pipe on top of the jam so we don't smush it all together. You can see that the tarts are about half full here, and the Frangipan is going to puff up a little bit, but we want an extra bit of space left on top so we can ice them. So these are going to go back in the oven at 160 this time, so make sure that you've turned your oven down, and we're going to put them in for about 25 to 26 minutes until they're lovely and golden on top. How cute are these? They are gorgeous and golden all the way around. Look at the bottom here. Smelling amazing as well, and there's a little bit of room left on top for our icing. So this is a really simple old school glace icing, starting with about 300 grams of icing sugar in here, and I'm going to add some water to it, and I'm just going to do it a tablespoon at a time because what we want to achieve here is just the right consistency. So a little bit of water at a time, because we can always add more water, we can't take it away. So just mix in a little bit and I'll show you what we're looking for. And that is the consistency that we are looking for. Kind of runny, but also thick. Sorry about that, guys. Right, now I'm just going to take a little bit of this out and we're going to make it red. And I just did that using a paste colour rather than a liquid. The liquid ones, you're going to have to add quite a lot to it to get it red, and you end up changing the consistency quite a lot. So always look for paste colours if possible. Now the red is going to go into a piping bag. I just made one with a bit of grease proof. I did a really short little tutorial on this, which I'll put in the description box below so you can make yourself one. So we'll pop that in. And then just fold the top of this over so it doesn't come splurging out the other end. But first of all, we need to put some white icing on top of our tart. So I'm going to put about a tablespoon on top of each one. And as this is quite a loose icing, it will kind of like make its own way to the edges, but you can sort of tease it with a spoon. Now we're going to grab our piping bag of red icing and snip the tiniest little bit off the top, a couple of millimeters. And then we're going to pipe some stripes all the way along the tart. And then we take a toothpick or a skewer and we do the simplest thing that makes the prettiest decoration. So we're going to drag the toothpick all the way through the icing, and look at that. So that is so easy. We're just dragging our toothpick through the icing in alternate directions and you get the most beautiful feathered design on top. So let's carry on and get the rest of our little tarts iced. And they wouldn't be cherry bakewells unless they had a cherry on top. Now, normally I would just shove one of these inside my mouth, but I'll do that once the camera's off. I'm going to cut one of these open so you can have a look inside. Oh my goodness! Bet you didn't think the inside would look even more beautiful than the outside, did you? The cake is absolutely perfectly baked. That lovely layer of jam, and look, that pastry is perfectly baked all the way through as well. It's perfect. What can I say other than, I told you. Absolutely delicious. Really nostalgic as well. Now this was a recipe that you guys suggested, so do please keep letting me know what you want to see in the comments box below, because I am loving trying all these things that kind of weren't in my head, but I love it. So next week we'll be back making, hopefully, I'm really hoping to do some cream puffs, which is going to use choux pastry, which is another kind of pastry. It's kind of like the next step up from this. It's really simple, a few little tips, and you'll be making amazing cream puffs, profiteroles, eclairs. So come back then. We'll have that ready for you guys, and please make this and share it with me over on Instagram using hashtag CupcakeJemma so we can all see and share it. And don't forget to head over to CupcakeJemma.com to get yourself all the tools that you need to be baking perfect, delicious treats.